Welcome to Inside the Box, programming for quality childcare during a pandemic. My name is Debbie Sluice. I'm the director for Growing Together Family Resource Center, a multi-site childcare center located in Chatham, Kent, Ontario. I've been there for 30 years. In addition to that, I also have my own company, which is called Dare to Declare. I offer and facilitate workshops as well as public speaking. I really enjoy coaching and supporting early child educators. I'm really excited to deliver this workshop to you. There are 4 main outcomes that you will be able to accomplish by the end of today's workshop. The first is that you will learn about the power of mindset to determine positive outcomes. We're going to spend a fair amount of time on this today. The second thing is that you will learn facts about COVID-19. I'm sure you already know many things about it, but I want to make sure that we are on the same page and that we're talking about the same things, and also how it impacts and choices that you're going to be making for the children's program. Thirdly, you will gain creative ideas. I have lots of images for in and outdoor programming that will promote and complement the 4 foundations in how does learning happen, while encouraging physical space between the children. Lastly, you will receive tips and hacks to meet the requirements. It's going to be a fun time together. Isn't this a fun picture? So let's start with mindset. What are things that you can change or control? The first thing that I can think of is thinking. You can control or change the thoughts that you think when you wake in the morning, when you go to bed at night, when you meet someone for the first time, when you're going into somewhere new. You can change your thinking. Secondly, you can change or control your communication. So the words that you use. Words are so powerful. So thinking about words that you use to yourself, but also the words that you use to others. You have control and you can change the words that you choose to use. The third thing is your imagination, the pictures that you hold in your head, whether it be true or whether it just be big, grandiose dreams. Those pictures and images that you have in your head, you can change those. The fourth thing that you can change is your behavior. So to all those things in terms of your communication, your thinking, how you react and how you respond to someone else, to a situation, to an event, you have control over your behavior. You can change your behavior. So carrying on with the idea that we can change certain things and thinking about our communication, what's one word you would use to describe returning to childcare during the pandemic? We have a large team at our childcare center, and I've heard multiple and different words used to describe the experience and how they're going to feel when they return to childcare. So one of the things I'm going to ask you is, was the word scary? I have heard this multiple times. And so I want to challenge you about thinking about the word scary. So stay with me here. So what if we change the word scary in describing returning to childcare during a pandemic to a word like interesting, challenging, new? Maybe you think I'm crazy, but think about how it feels when you describe the return to childcare using those words instead of the word scary. So again, reflecting on our mindset. We have control and we can change our thinking, our communication, the pictures we hold in our head, and our behavior. So, how are you going to decide that you're going to show up at childcare during this pandemic? Are you going to show up as a worrier, and the words scary or scared, or as a warrior, feeling challenged. See the difference in words? And what I want to say is, I'm not saying this to shame anyone who has worries or who's feeling scared. Let's talk a little bit more through this. But I want you to take on an identity, to change the pictures that you hold in your head, to change the words that you use, to change your thinking, to change your behavior, to find yourself empowered and to be the warrior versus the worrier. I want to be compassionate and I want to be clear. As Brené Brown says, clear is kind. You as a warrior certainly still will have your worries. That's not what I'm saying, but it's really important to become self-aware and to put out what is the scary thing, what is your worry. So here's an exercise for you to help dig that out. I'm going to give you an example. So get out a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to ask yourself, what is my biggest worry? What is the thing that I'm most afraid of? Write that down. So here's an example. This is something I've heard within our own team. I'm not going to be able to comply with the new expectations, especially around the cleaning. So then ask yourself, okay, and then what? Well, I'm going to get stressed about not being able to do all of the cleaning. Then ask yourself, okay, and then what? Well, then I'm going to get in trouble with my supervisor and with the ministry. Okay, then what? I'm going to get a big fine for not complying. Okay, and then what? I won't be able to afford the fine, and I'm going to burn out, and I'll have to quit as an ECE. All right, so now we've gotten to the bottom of really what is your big worry, that you're going to burn out and that you're going to have to quit. I want you to ask yourself, is this true? Is this really true? If this worry is something that is paralyzing you, so you cannot move forward, I want you to seek help. Talk this through with your supervisor or a trusted friend. Perhaps your workplace has an employee assistance program. As a warrior, we all continue to still have worries. What a warrior does is they don't retreat, but they arm themselves with knowledge so that fear is not the place that they're going to be leading from. You deserve this, and so do the children within your care. My hope for you is that you will feel empowered, that you recognize that you do have control, that you do have a choice in the way that you think, in the way that you speak, in the way that you show up. And when you decide that you are going to switch your mindset and you're going to look this straight in the face and take stock of your worries and face your fears and determine, are they true, or what is true, what isn't true, what's within my control? How do you think that decision is going to impact the children? I know it will have a huge impact in the way that you decide to show up every day, as it does with any situation you're dealing with, but certainly with this as well. Okay, I told you I was spending a lot of time on mindset. It's really, really important. Just like any quality childcare, it's not the environment, it's not the childcare director, it's not even the families, it's you. What you're bringing every day to the childcare is where the quality lies. So it's really important for you to become self-aware and have an understanding over what you think and what you do. So let's look at this question. What do I have control over? I love the document Think, Act, and Feel. And I would challenge you to take a look at that online. And there's beautiful articles in there. I'm going to quote one in a little bit. But I love this equation, E plus R equals O. And what that means is that the event, and most time people think, oh, the event actually determines my outcome. So COVID-19 means I'm going to have a difficult time at the childcare. It's going to be, very difficult to conduct programming. The children will be upset. So they just jump from event equals O. So E equals O. But what they forget is that the R in the response is the key. So your response is actually what you have control over, what you can change. How you decide to respond to the event actually is what determines your outcome. This is magic. This is amazing. I just finished reading Rachel Hollis's book, Girl, Stop Apologizing. You've probably heard of her first book, Girl, Wash Your Face. Both are amazing. I haven't read the first one, but I will. And I ran across this quote that she has that I think was just from a few months ago in response to this whole quarantine. So she says, the faster you can come to terms with this new normal, the faster that you can let go of what was, is the sooner you'll find joy in what is. Not one of us will emerge from what is happening the same person they went in. Stop lamenting over the loss, how things used to be, and you start sitting in the blessings. It is about practicing what is your present. Rachel Hollis. I've actually been using that as one of the terms when I've described COVID-19, when things have come up and opportunities, and calling them COVID blessings. And it almost feels a bit sacrilegious, but there truly have been blessings about this time that we've been in quarantine and just discovering different things about our family, different things about our colleagues, different things about our organization. And so there's definitely been COVID blessings. It seems to me that COVID-19 and the pandemic and the quarantine, it's almost like that has just become larger than life. And we've forgotten some of the other things that were there far before all of this happened. And one of the things I want to remind you of as educators is that we have this beautiful document, How Does Learning Happen? It's free online, so you can download it. How Does Learning Happen? It's the Ontario's pedagogy for early years. And one of the things that I find very precious in this document is that it asks, well, the very title is How Does Learning Happen? It's a question. But one of the questions it asks is, what is your view of the child? Secondly, I want to ask you, how then is this reflected in your practice during this time? So regardless whether we're in a pandemic or, we're in the playground during the, summer and everyone is healthy and everything, no pandemic, children are still children who are competent, capable of complex thinking, curious, and rich in potential. So you can see where that little arrow is there. I love that definition of children. And children haven't changed. Our situation has changed, our environments have changed, but children haven't changed, and they deserve. So we'll talk about this in a few minutes, what children deserve. But it's really important that, again, you look back at your thinking around what is your view of the child. And then, secondly, how is this reflected in your practice? Let's take a look at some simple COVID-19 facts. So COVID-19 is spread mainly from person to person through close physical contact. Close physical contact means less than 2 meters away in the same room or area for over 15 minutes. Secondly, there's no vaccine at this time available to protect against COVID-19, but there are things that you should do to prevent it from spreading. So let's talk about those. Here's some simple things that you can do to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Some everyday actions. Wash your hands often with soap and water or alcohol-based sanitizer. Soap and water, simple. Secondly, sneeze or cough into your sleeve or into a tissue. Thirdly, avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth. You can even start to practice this now. I never realized how often that I was touching my face until I really was becoming more aware of it and how it could spread COVID-19. Avoid contact with people who are sick. And lastly, stay home and self-isolate if you're sick. So some of the surfaces frequently touched with hands are more likely to be contaminated. These include things like doorknobs, handrails, elevator or door buttons, light switches, cabinet handles, faucet handles, tables, countertops, and electronics. It's not yet known how long the virus causing COVID-19 lives on surfaces. However, early evidence suggests it can live on objects and surfaces from up to a few hours to days. So better safe than sorry, and to have a regular disinfecting routine, which I'm sure you have put together with your supervisor. But the one thing that you can do that's simple is to continue to wash your hands with soap and water. This quote is taken from Think, Feel, Act. It's called The Power of Positive Adult-Child Relationships. Connection is the Key. It was written by Dr. Jean Clinton from McMaster University. She is amazing and wise, and I always appreciate and loved her mantra saying, love grows brains. So this is about connection is the key. She says, as you begin this article, think about what it means to make a connection to one another, and think about the strong connections you have with the children in your care. In our hearts and minds, we are likely to feel connected to those we spend our days with, but routinely, we may find ourselves spending more time on correcting and directing, leaving little time for connecting. On a daily basis, what is your C-D-C ratio? I love that. Connecting directing, connecting. So what is your CDC ratio? So I want you to think about that when I go back to, again, about a child. What is your view of the child? Children still need, and probably even more so, this sense of connection. And how can we incorporate that into a program during a pandemic? That's really our big question, isn't it? This slide was invited from a thought and a statement at a recent board meeting. A board member, when she heard about the pandemic and opening up the childcare center, she said, I worry that children will just hear no, 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 no. And what will that do to them? And that really hit my heart. And I appreciated that so much from her. So I want you to think about that as well as an educator, and think about what can you say yes to within your program. Yes, yes, you can do that. Yes, yes, yes. Rather than the restrictions and the boundaries that will cause us to say no, no, no. My grandson is about 8 months old. He looks like about this size. I think this little guy is maybe a little bit younger and smaller than my grandson, but it just tugged at my heart. And seeing him sitting there independently playing with the musical instruments, the two questions that come up for me are, one, what do children deserve? So I'd like you to take a minute and pause the webinar, the workshop, and to write down everything that comes to mind for you. What do children deserve? Write it out, brain dump it on a piece of paper. So give you a chance to do that. Now coming back, I want you to think about when you are rearranging the room, when you're setting out invitations for play, when you are setting up activities, when you're leading activities, to pose the question to yourself, in the name of what? What is the reason why I'm doing this? In the name of what is this for? And to keep, again, the child, their needs, their interests, their childhood in the forefront, to ask yourself, in the name of what? There are only engaged children or bored children. Preparation. Preparation is going to be more crucial than ever to the quality of your program. So how do you discover what children are interested in? Like you always have. This is no different. Observations of their play, listening in on their conversations with each other or with their families, with your colleagues, and also listening to them describe their activities at home. What do they do in their leisure time? Another way is to understand what's developmentally appropriate activities. Thinking about schemas, especially if you're setting up for toddler play. Planning circles. We'll talk a little bit more about that, how to socially, I shouldn't say that socially, physically distance one another, because we don't want to socially distance. That's the opposite of what we want to do. So having planning circles where you're asking the children specific questions and that you're planning out your day with them. So it becomes a collaborative effort for them to also be contributing to the overall programming and the planning of the day and of the activities. Speaking with parents, whether that be through social media platform or sending notes. It will be a unique way to communicate with families, and that you won't be able to have that person-to-person meetup like you used to, but there are many ways through social media and various platforms like Hi Mama that you'd be able to communicate with them and ask them specific questions around what their child's interested in. Other educators are an amazing resource for ideas, and they may see children in your group through a different lens. And just trial and error. You're not going to know unless you try. And when you have a really successful activity, the kids are going to want to do it again and again. And don't discount your own childhood experiences. What were things that you loved to do as a kid? How can you reproduce those and replicate those within the childcare setting? Are there things that you did that will be safe to replicate during this time of quarantine. Approximately 15 years ago, our childcare organization went from a theme-based program to an emergent-based program. And someone said to me while we were putting together this workshop, this feels like we're going backwards, like we're not progressive, that we're going back to the ways of being when we were theme-based and it was all planned. So my question and challenge to you is to think about, is a planned program still emergent? I would say yes. It's all in the execution, and it's all in going back to, in the name of what? In the name of what are you planning this for? Is it for your ease, your convenience, or is it in taking into account what the children are interested in, what developmentally is appropriate for them? So when you are planning, and as I said, planning and preparation is going to be crucial for quality programming because you won't be able to do just things on the fly as you would in a traditional, more emergent program. So some of these things will be expected to do on your own time, whether it be in the evenings, scouring yard sales on the weekends, thrift shops, and just to stay curious and open to possibilities. Put things on your own social media feeds to say that you're asking for certain kinds of loose parts that are easily washable, and you can give a variety of options. One that comes to mind would be juice lids. They're very colorful, they're easy to sanitize and wash, and they invoke and provoke imagination. Open up your lines of communication, as I said, through your organization's social media or your own personal social media. Bring in new provocations, invitations daily. Pique the children's interest, get them excited. What's coming tomorrow? Initiate longer term projects. So as I said, new invitations daily, but also something that will invite them to continue to work on it on an ongoing basis. And as I said earlier, involve the children. So they're not just consumer driven, is that, oh, what is this activity? Do it, take part in it, done it, out of there, but that they are actually involved. It becomes like a democratic playroom where the children are involved in the planning and in the preparation even as well for the activity and for the classroom, for the playroom. I've already mentioned how does learning happen, but I want to bring it up one more time because it's such an amazing framework to do programming from. Our educators have fondly coined it as WEBE, taking the first letter of each of the 4 foundations so that we can remember them. So the first being W, we, or well-being. Second one being expression. The third, belonging. And the fourth, engagement. So a challenge I have for you, again, you can write this down with your pen and paper, is that when you are setting up your playroom, take photos that represent the invitation for each of these 4 foundations. Our educators did this. This was before COVID-19, this past winter, and they were really excited to showcase the various foundations that were evident within their room, whether it be the children, the way they were cooperating with one another, or whether it be an environment, but that the 4 foundations were very visible, that you could see learning happening within the playroom. Let's stay with the idea of what can we say yes to. So thinking about what is not possible, such as removing all toys which can't be cleaned or disinfected, what is possible? Seeking loose parts that can be cleaned and disinfected, making books out of photo albums with wipeable pages. What's not possible are things such as stuffed animals and soft pillows. The possibility is perhaps adding vinyl mats, which can be cleaned and disinfected. What's not possible? We need to remove communal indoor and outdoor sensory, water and sand. Children can't have access to that. But what is possible is utilizing individual, one-use, or items that can be cleaned in sensory bins. Another idea might be to wrap sensory items in large Ziploc bags. Those bags can easily be cleaned. And lastly, and I know this is a tough one, no indoor singing. Ouch. It just doesn't feel right as an educator, does it? So, thinking inside the box, what can we do to offer music, rhythm for children indoors? What about recording your voice to use indoors, say on an iPad? What other kind of voice activated electronics could you use for music? As important as preparation and programming will be going forward, as equally as important is organization. So thinking about how can I organize the playroom so that we can make it easy for myself and for children to access the materials in a safe way. So one of the ways is for cubbies, space them at least every other cubby, or if you can, depending on the number of children in your classroom, in your playroom, that you can space them at least 2 or 3 apart. If children are bringing things in from home and they need to have them for comfort, have big, large Ziploc bags and keep them in their cubby area or in a large Ziploc bag, which then can be disinfected easily. Have individual containers, such as large yogurt containers with lids for individual art packs, glue, paintbrush, scissors, crayons, and markers. And edit the number of toys. And even this is really good practice anyways. And it's something that I've seen over the years with many educators is that we have a habit of just adding in more and more toys, and we forget to take out the ones that are already on the shelf and to edit. And sometimes when there's so much, it limits the imagination. Whereas when you can have intentional placement of toys and pieces like loose parts, it elevates the imagination. So thinking about editing toys also to eliminate and to take into account schema play, especially with toddlers. Continuing on with some organizational ideas, each cohort has their own tote or kit, or we've done this for many years where we've had new garbage cans, but they have like the wheels with a lid on them, and they store the outdoor toys. That way, each group has their own set of outdoor toys that can be cleaned but stays separate from the other children. Another idea for organization is to keep the cots separated during nap time, but also head to toe so that children are not facing each other and can spread germs that way. The other thing is to ensure the bedding does not touch during the storage. Create markings on the floor where children are to sit or stand at a safe distance from each other. But more than that, how can you do that in a unique way that doesn't feel commercial or medical, but feels fun? And I love this picture of this little guy on this tire with a pillow, and it's been wrapped again in a wipeable material. And so it's very clear that this is a toddler and this is where he sits, and he's at a safe distance from his friend on another chair that's created out of a tire as well. So how can you do this in a way that goes back to in the name of what, and that invokes play and feels comfortable and is fun for the children and for you? This was taken from an article written by the Hannon organization, and I've cited the link down below. So these are some suggestions for book reading. So if paper books are off limits, which they most likely will be, ways of providing books that can be sanitized should be explored, such as bathtub books or laminated books, or ones that can be homemade, which I talked about earlier, maybe out of photo albums. Offer easy to clean props. So for example, children that are reading along with you to a book like such as Where Do Diggers Sleep at Night, have a little toy digger that they can hold on to. Read with lots of animation to hold the children's attention. Isn't that obvious even during, not just during a pandemic, but all the time? Make sure the book is large and clear enough for the children to see the illustrations, because you are going to have the children sitting not up close next to you or not close to each other, so there will be a fairly large area where they are going to need to hear and see the book. So you want to make sure that it's large enough for them to all see. And then pause frequently to encourage interaction and conversation with the children. Pausing helps create opportunities to act out the story, imitate the actions, ask questions, make interesting comments, and relate the book to the children's personal experiences, which all goes back to what we were talking earlier around well-being and belonging. So rather than thinking about what we can't do, what can we do as educators? I really love this picture of this little girl spinning around, dancing, feeling free. The hashtag there is kind of a movement. It was something that we started around kindness, and then we created a hashtag around movement because we also were really encouraging movement and dance at the childcare. So when you create documentation, when you send messages to families, when you're showing what learning is happening, consider creating a hashtag. Something very simplistic that you can do in order to ensure physical distancing is decreasing the number of chairs around the tables and or space them out. This picture here is of this little girl, and what she's creating is a leprechaun trap. So every year around St. Patrick's Day, the children like to create something that they imagine that will trap leprechauns, and it creates a very magical experience. So thinking about something like that for your own environment, what can you do that children can create each individually, but again, collectively, the children set up their traps and they went on a scavenger hunt to see where the leprechauns had been. To support physical distancing, encourage children to find their own seats by using placemats or trays on the tables to help identify the children's individual play space. You can see here in these photos, this was taken at Growing Together Family Resource Center, that it's not very obvious, but it is to the educators. So each child has their own tray. I also want to point out some of the loose materials of things that actually can be disinfected and washed. I like the fake flowers there on the bottom that can easily be washed with soapy water. Here's another example of lovely loose parts, but all of them, again, can be washed with soapy water and disinfected. Each child has their own tray, but it's a shiny surface. It creates reflection, it creates interest. And when it's set up in an inviting way, such as this, it says, come and play. The title of this workshop is called Inside the Box. Traditionally, when we think of unconventional thinking, we think about outside the box. But I really wanted to honor the fact that as educators, we only have so much space within our playrooms, inside our box. So what other surfaces, what other areas can you encourage for the children to participate with and engage with that will still, again, encourage that physical distancing? What about under the table? So in this picture, you can see that the educators at Growing Together have taped up a blank piece of paper and have given crayons. Not only is this an interesting activity, it actually also supports their fine motor as it encourages them to hold the crayon and to move their wrist in a way that will benefit their growth. This activity and image was taken from Pinterest. Growing Together Family Resource Center has its own Pinterest page, and in fact, this also is from one of the boards called In the Box. So one of the educators who oversees our Pinterest page has created a separate board just to support this workshop. So please head there, Growing Together Family Resource Center, and check it out. So you'll find activities such as this. Tin can bowling, again, using loose parts. You can paint them or leave them the silver color. You want to make sure there's no sharp edges. But the beauty of this is that two children can play together, going back to our goal of creating and supporting and nurturing relationships. But one child stands with the ball at the one end, and the other child, their responsibility would be to set up the cans. So you've got them spaced apart, at least in the 2 meters of required physical distancing, but they're playing together. So what other kinds of games can you prepare and plan that will promote physical distancing as this keeps the children at a safe distance from each other? This is a great idea as well, where children can be working on a collective project, but in their own space, 2 meters safely from each other. So creating the connecting of these straws, of these pieces, and then putting it together as a large piece. So again, it promotes that sense of well-being, sense of belonging, and sense of purpose and building the relationships, but being safe. Now, here's an amazing idea. This was taken from one of our educators during our night program at one of our locations. It's open till 10 p.m. And the children there, we have lower numbers, with the educator, turned a table upside down, wrapped it in saran wrap, and used it as a surface to paint on. As I said, get creative. Think, what can I do inside the box? But that is really outside the box thinking in terms of surfaces. But in this case, as you can see, there's 4 sides. So a child could be on either side, safely, physically distanced from each other, but collectively working on a singular project of beauty. Adding loose parts to the book center is an amazing way to have children further engaged with books. I'm looking at this book, and although it is paper, I do believe it has a glossy kind of surface. So take a look at the books that you have to see whether or not they can be disinfected. I know that those gemstones for sure can be. And an idea that I have and that I received from an educator was to use the mesh laundry bags. So that way these gems aren't just all getting lost into the bottom of the sink, but if you put them in a mesh laundry bag, they'll be much more easy to wash and disinfect. And once they're all dry, to restock into your containers. Lunch and snack time is one of the favorite times of the day for educators and children alike. It provides the opportunity for relationships to be developed, cultivated, as well as for lots of stories to be told. The difference between post-COVID and during this time of the pandemic is that for safety reasons, as an educator, you'll need to individually plate the children's meals rather than having them serve themselves. However, to encourage independence, continue to offer choices while considering their individual needs and appetites, and asking certain things like, would you like more of this or less of this? Do you want to have water to drink or milk? Giving as many choices and options as possible while keeping their meal choice safe. Outdoors. I think in traditional licensed centers, we spend our required time of 2 hours based on the Childcare and Early Years Act outdoors. How can you expand that ratio of time, those hours of time? What else can you do that's traditionally done inside that you can take outdoors? Consider your fencing. Whether you have a wood fence like this or chain link like most childcare centers do, it is prime real estate. It is surrounding all of those surfaces. What can you put on it that will encourage individual activities for the children and to keep them engaged? Here is a school age activity that was done a couple of years ago using pool noodles and chairs, all things that can be washed, disinfected, but create a boatload of fun. And you can see that the school age children were having a lot of fun with the Olympics. But as you can see the child in the background and the child jumping, they are safely apart in terms of physical distancing. One of the shifts that I see for licensed childcare and for you as educators is more planning, more preparation, more invitations. Is this a bad thing? No way. I think that again, it still is right in the line and the idea around emergent programming. It still gives children choices, but it gives them more concrete ideas on the way that they can still remain physically distanced in a safe way. Having individual kits, totes, or cans, as I talked about earlier, like a garbage can with wheels, with the materials that you're going to need outside will ensure safety for each of the groups. Here's a great idea for a hammock. The picture on the right was taken in one of our school age programs last summer. The children really enjoyed having this swinging, comfy experience, and it can easily be thrown into the wash when it's finished single use. Who doesn't love bubbles? Something you may want to invest in is a bubble machine. So we won't be able to blow them as we want to ensure that we're not spreading germs, but certainly there are other ways to spread the bubbles and to create the bubbles, whether it be waving the wand in the air or a bubble machine. But I know that from babies up to school age and adults alike, we all love the magic of bubbles. I spoke earlier about the real estate of the fences surrounding the playground, but in addition to that, you've also got surfaces such as asphalt or concrete. What can you do with those that will create activities for the children that again will keep them at a safe distance but keep them engaged? Have the children draw their own obstacle course. Follow the line. This is a fun one. I recall a number of years ago, one of our educators, she gave her preschool children their own individual clipboard. They had a pencil, a piece of paper, their clipboard, and the invitation was to look at the daffodils that were coming up outdoors, just outside the childcare, and to draw them. And the results were incredible. To the right, this little guy is using a potato peeler. We had this invitation from Diane Cashin from one of her nature-based workshops. The children loved using the potato peeler as a way to whittle the sticks, and it can be done indoors or outdoors. Learning outdoors can happen in so many ways, with simple things like dandelions, grass, rocks. The only limitation is your imagination, certainly not the children's. Dandelions, grass, rocks, all of these amazing things can be found outdoors and can be used to support the children's play. Traditionally, dramatic play and its center is set up indoors. What can you take outdoors that can be safely used to encourage running, jumping, being the superhero that they are in a dramatic play? Can you set up a restaurant, a store? So taking the full dramatic play center outdoors. What about if we remove the phrase weather permitting from our vocabulary and it's just permitting weather? These little toddlers are outside with umbrellas. The advantage to having the umbrellas is not only that it keeps them dry, but it also creates the physical distancing in a fun, natural way. Here's some tips and hacks for you to maintain a quality program during this time of pandemic. Have photos of the children themselves washing their hands. Use decals on the table to indicate areas where to sit. Use personalized placemats to indicate seating or to sit upon during physical distance during a group time. Use garden knee pads or sit-upons for seating during outdoor group times. Do you have an iPad in your room or some other kind of electronic device that you can use that's voice activated? For example, Siri, play the ABCs. Make games out of good hygiene. For example, when children are coughing or sneezing, have them do the vampire or chicken wing. You can have Siri, so Siri, play Happy Birthday or ABCs for the 20-second hand washing tune. Cool the kids down with a garden hose that's like the soaker kind that you would use in your garden. Put masking tape or duct tape around certain sections so children know which area they can be safely running through. As I said earlier, use mesh laundry bags to gather toys that have been used for washing and easy sorting once they're cleaned. If you're wearing a mask, ensure that you get down to the children's level. Use arm gestures to assist in your communication and be really expressive with your eyes and speak clearly. Here's some percentages of some things I was thinking about in terms of the workshop we did today. Things that you can aim for, and I understand each situation is unique. Attempt to be outdoors at least 50% of your day. What can you create that would be outdoor playrooms? Spend 75% of your energy planning, preparing, and documenting, and the other 25% cleaning and disinfecting. And provide each child with 100% of your focused attention at least 3 times a day. Being intentional about these things will create a quality program. As we conclude, I want to remind you as an early childhood educator to remember your why. Why did you want to be in this field in the first place? What is your mission? What is your movement? How can you create the greatest impact with children and families? Remember, you are a superhero, and your job is to save the day for play. I'll end here with a quote from Dr. Jean Clinton. A lot depends on what our mindset is and how we view our role. What do we understand our job to be? What we think affects how we feel and affects how we act. Lastly, I want to express my thanks to the talented educators of Growing Together Family Resource Center who continue to inspire me with the dedication to the Childcare's core values and place positive relationships at the center of all they do. If you're curious about Growing Together Family Resource Center, the website's there listed below. Thanks again. Take good care of you and the children.